Hello and welcome to the James Cook Podcast. I'm your host, James Cook. In this episode, we're going to be sitting down talking with Willie and Cody Braun of Reckless Kelly, one of my favorites, and I know it's one of your favorites if you love the Texas Red Dirt scene. We sat down, we talked about their multi-decade careers, slowing down on the touring, their favorite albums of all time. That was one of my favorite moments of the interview, and their latest album, The Last Frontier. Enjoy. Thank you for joining the James Cook Podcast today, buddy. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
When I first agreed to do the interview, but in my head, I guess I thought, well, they'll both be talking to me at the same time. But this is cool because I actually have certain questions for you and certain questions for him, because I know that you just got finished with The Last Frontier and you worked with some of my favorite people on this, including Jonathan Tyler.
Well, we've known JT for quite a while. He has a great band called Jonathan Tyler and the Northern Lights, and we've done a lot of shows together over the years down here in Texas, and we worked together on a Tom Petty tribute up in Steamboat at a festival up there. And so we've known each other for a long time, but during the pandemic, he was living about a half a mile from me and had a little studio that he put together and started making records over there, and would call me quite often to pop over and do some fiddle and mandolin stuff. And so we just got to be really good friends over the pandemic. And then when we got ready to make this new record, Willie and I were talking about bringing somebody else in as an extra producer. And I brought his name up, and Willie thought that was a really good idea. And we just thought he would bring kind of more of a rock edge and just a different ear to, what we do. And it worked out really great. We, the three of us produced the record together and had a lot of fun. And he just brought so much to the project. It really worked out great.
The last video that you guys had for What's Left of My Heart, is that the bar near Jonathan's house?
It's not Sam's Town Point. It looks a lot. It's very similar to Sam's. I think that's what you're thinking of.
Yes.
Yeah. It's very similar. It's the one we did the video at was called Giddy Ups. And unfortunately, it shut down about a month and 2 months after we filmed the video. They lost their lease and kind of went the way as a lot of the old Austin places have gone, where they just couldn't afford the rent anymore. And somebody new is taking it over now and changing it all up after 50 years, which really sucks. But the way she goes,
You also had people like Kelly Willis on the title track, The Last Frontier. Is that someone you've worked with before, or is that just an old friend?
Yeah, we've known Kelly for a long time. When we moved to Austin, honestly, I mean, we were huge fans. When we were coming up, we used to listen to a lot of her records, and like I said, we're big fans of her music. And so when we moved to Austin, we would go see her play, and then we ended up with the same booking agent and got to do some shows with her in the early 2000s. So got to know her and Bruce, and then we got to do some stuff out at Bruce has a studio outside of town called The Bunker. And we recorded some stuff out there, and we did a Guy Clark song, and he asked Kelly to come in and sing harmony with me on that song. And so we get to sing harmony on that together. And then when this song came around, I suggested to Willie that we make it a duet, and suggested Kelly, and he was like, oh yeah, that'd be great. So I just called her up and asked her if she was free that afternoon or sometime soon. And she said, yeah. And came down and nailed it. It really, her voice fit the song perfectly, and her and Willie's voices went really well together. So it was kind of like a bucket list deal for us to get to record with her, and really honored to have her on the record.
Every time you release something, to me, you go big into the album mentality. So a lot of the mentality now is like EPs and singles. Every time I've ever listened to y'all, I'm always amazed by the album art and by the mentality of just making an entire album. Did you go into this album with that same mentality?
Yeah, I mean, we always kind of have a concept with the records that we do, and sometimes the concepts are not like these huge, deep, and expanding ideas. Sometimes they're pretty simple. This one was kind of that way. Willie's concept was to do every song had to be 3 minutes or less, and kind of going back into that old pop radio vibe where don't bore us, get to the chorus kind of quick to the point tunes, with uh, a couple courses, a turnaround, a lick, a hook, and and you get out. So that was kind of the concept on this one, but we also always kind of look at what songs go together, what songs make the most sense together. So you're kind of telling a story and everything feels cohesive. But yeah, we've always enjoyed making records as a whole instead of going in and trying to do one song or two song at a time. Um, it's just honestly more fun to be in the studio for a week or two and to enjoy that experience and see what comes out of it.
So you're like diving into the mentality for a good period of time whenever you're making an album. So whenever you're doing this, is there favorite albums that you kind of base what you're producing off of, or is there someone that you're kind of emulating, or is it just you're grabbing the sounds and just making the best of it?
I think we probably used to do that a little more than we do now, where we would kind of listen to records and find sounds that we liked and try and emulate those, whether it be a drum sound or a guitar tone or, something that record had. We've definitely kind of pulled from our influences on that over the years. I would say as we've gone along, the last several records, I think, has more been about kind of finding our sound and trying to expand on that, and kind of what we've developed over the years as our kind of country rock thing, just trying to find ways to make that new and interesting with also keeping the band's vibe and sound personality, whatever you want to call it, keeping that intact where we don't stray too far from, what the Reckless Kelly thing is, but also trying to not make the same record over and over, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. When it comes to your live music, I know that you just announced that you're going to be like kind of turning the page, opening a new chapter, slowing down on the touring that you've been doing. Are you guys going off to do solo things, or are you just kind of saying this calendar looks crazy year after year? We've got to calm it down a little bit.
It's more the latter. Willie and I have been playing music professionally since we were kids. We had a family band with our dad and brothers growing up. So, I mean, we've been on the road since we were 10, 11 years old. And we just kind of got to the point where it's just like we just wanted to be home a little bit more, and realizing kind of where we are as a band. We've kind of covered most of the ground in the States and built up most of the markets that we feel are buildable for us. And I don't know, we just kind of decided to try a different approach, after almost 30 years of just going out and touring nonstop and playing 120 or more shows a year. Like what would it be like if we just put a pause on it and only played, here and there when we really want to, or it makes sense. So we're just, like I say, we're not retiring as a band, but definitely gonna take a couple years off after next year and just kind of see what happens. We don't really have a solid plan, which is par for the course with this band. We kind of fly by the bootstraps.
Now, I know last year you had a great year. One of the things that I was paying attention to was that you did some shows with Steve Earle last summer, and you guys joined a little bit on stage for something called the Dukes. Tell me a little bit about that. How crazy was that experience?
It was awesome. Steve was one of our biggest influences, and has always been one of our heroes. And again, we've gotten to work with him over the years on different projects, but kind of sporadic. And we were at his son's memorial in Nashville a couple years ago, and his band had kind of dissolved at the point, and he'd been out touring solo for the year, and he's still kind of doing that, just him playing out solo. And he just asked me if we'd be interested in doing some band shows for certain things, and I said, yeah, we definitely would be. And he goes, well, talk to your brother. And I said, I don't have to talk to my brother. I know he's in. So
Yeah.
we just kind of started talking about it more seriously then, and we're able to put together, I think, 5 shows last year, and where we were his full backup band. We'd go out and open up the show and then bring him out and do a whole set of Steve songs. So it was a blast. I mean, it was one of those dream come true kind of deals where you get to play with your hero and getting to play those songs that we grew up listening to. And you're in the middle of it and you look over and he's singing. It's just like, what's going on here? This is amazing. A lot of fun.
Was there like a song that you really just like loved every single time?
it's hard to pick, and he actually let us pick some of the songs too, which I thought was really cool. Um, Probably, I mean, Guitar Town and Copperhead Road. I mean, those songs that are just iconic to me. You start into it, and we open the shows with Guitar Town, and I don't know, it's such a rush. Playing the song and then being able to play with him and seeing the crowd response too. I mean, it was just the whole thing was a great experience.
Yeah, imagine Copperhead Road, just seeing the reaction from the audience.
Yeah, I learned I need to wear glasses from now on. At our festival in Idaho, I started Copperhead Road in the wrong spot. I had to stop. I read the set list wrong because I didn't have my friggin' glasses on. Start into this. He's like, no, wrong spot. I was like, shit.
How long were you into the song before you kind of realized, like,
long enough for everybody to know that it was Copperhead Road.
Braun Brothers reunion celebrating 40th anniversary in 2024. I was like, there's no way they could be 40th anniversary. That's a mighty long. What were they playing since they were? And then you said it, 10 years old, 11 years old. So is that whenever you guys started doing the reunion? Was whenever y'all were first kind of gigging, or when did that start?
Well, no, the secret there is my dad and his brothers had a band called the Braun Brothers in the 70s. So they were playing around Idaho, and in the late 80s, early 90s, they did a reunion. It was the 80s when they did the reunion, the Braun Brothers reunion, and got all of their friends together just for a one weekend show in Stanley. So that was kind of the first reunion, but my dad and his brothers had been throwing, concerts and outdoor festival type shows in that area for well over 40 years. We had a hard time picking what year, because honestly, it's closer to 45 years or more that they've been doing shows up there. So like kind of deciding when the actual first Braun Brothers reunion was versus kind of when they started doing festivals. We kind of we said, we're going to go with 40. And it's going to be after 30 or 39 years of bickering over how many it was, we just said, we're going with 40. So
I'm a big album guy. I can sit around and talk to people about their favorite albums and just make that a podcast, to be honest with you, because I think sometimes people get in there and really start analyzing. Is there any albums that really stick out to you that you remember when you were growing up that really kind of made an influence?
Oh yeah. The Sweethearts of the Rodeo record, Graham Parsons, and the Grievous Angels, that record, all the Flying Burrito stuff, and the Byrds, had a Byrds greatest hits record. That stuff was really influential when we were starting the band. And then Billy Joe Shaver had a live record called Unshaven with him and his son Eddie, and this band they recorded at Smith's Old Bar in Atlanta. And that live record is my favorite live record because it's all really raw. It was produced by Ethan Johns and just had this energy and this vibe to it that we were just like, that's what we want to sound like. Like that's the sound, It was just this cool rock and roll band singing country songs. And so that was huge. Trying to think other influential, like Guitar Town from Steve Earle, of course. Listened to a lot of the Eagles growing up, all those records, a lot of 70s stuff. Pino Bennett was another kind of local guy that we grew up listening to that was doing the country, kind of cowboy country stuff and putting more of an edge on it. I guess I'm trying to think stuff that's a little earlier that influenced. The Desert Rose Band was another band that I listened to a lot. I grew up listening to a lot of Bob Wills, Western swing, being the fiddle player, and playing a lot of that old cowboy stuff with my dad. So I had a big influence by those old Western records, like Sons of the Pioneers and Roy Rogers and the harmony singing and all that. I drew a lot from that growing up, and then finally got into Zeppelin and rock and roll. And my brother Willie got into the rock stuff a lot earlier, but it was funny because we grew up without television and without any mainstream radio where we grew up. And so we were just kind of chronologically listened to music as if, we grew up in the 50s, or like started with the cowboy stuff, and then the 50s rock and roll, and 60s and 70s rock and roll and country. Same thing. Just kind of heard a lot of the old honky tonk stuff from my dad, and then got into 90s country. Like I never really knew when I hear the radio if it was classic or if it was what was happening at the moment or what was popular at the time. I really didn't have much of a concept for that. So just a lot of different influences that kind of shaped who we are as a whole, but pretty broad range of stuff.
Always one of those bands that sound very limitless, but at the same time, I always know that's Reckless Kelly. You got a few shows coming up in 2025. You're going to be promoting the album, and then after that tour is done, and at the end of next year, you're going to be slowing down. So I wanted to kind of come back to that and ask, what's something that you're kind of excited about now that you can have a little bit more free time?
Yeah, honestly, just being here in Austin. I live in Austin, Texas, and it's such a fun city. And I've been here almost 30 years, and I have so many friends here that have regular gigs, and there's always some fun shows that pop up. Like this last week, I played for a Graham Parsons tribute, and next week I'm playing in a Chris Christopherson tribute. And like I said, I've got a lot of friends that have regular gigs here I can go sit in with, and so just being able to enjoy Austin and the music scene here is one thing I'm looking forward to. Being able to produce some records. I'm talking to a couple of people now about producing a couple projects this year, and hopefully more, and also do a lot of studio sessions myself. So I don't know, just kind of, I'm definitely going to continue playing music and being busy as I can, just kind of not being on the road all the time. My plan for the moment, but like I said, I'm just kind of waiting to see what presents itself, and how much, I don't know how much I'm going to want to go out and play or not, but I always enjoy playing, so I'm pretty much always out and about.
Yeah, I imagine there's a little bit more of a relaxed feeling knowing that you don't necessarily have to be on the road, and you can just kind of play whenever the opportunity presents itself. So that seems very promising, man. Congratulations on your on
Yeah, I
everything
hope it
that's
works
coming
out
to
that
you.
way. We'll see.
Yeah, right. Congratulations on everything that's coming to you, Cody. The album, incredible. Absolutely love diving in it yesterday. Diving into the videos, very, very cool stuff. Thank you so much for joining us on the James Cook podcast today. I got another interview with Willie here shortly, so I'm looking forward to seeing if your answers match up when it comes to your favorite albums. I can't wait to see what his favorite albums were.
It'll be fun. Willie and I have shared a bedroom since we were little kids, and then been on the road together since we were little kids. So you're probably going to get a lot of the same shit.
That's perfect. Cody Braun joining us on the James Cook podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, Cody, man.
Thanks, James. You guys have a great day.
All right, this is the second half of the podcast that I'm doing today. One of the things that really struck me right when I was kind of diving into what you've been up to lately is the single for the album, The Last Frontier. You did the video all by yourself, and I was watching this magnificent video with the shots. It looks like that you had a drone that you were using. Tell us a little bit about this process. It's a really cool video that you did did you do it all by yourself, or did you have any help with this, or?
I did. The only help I got was I borrowed my little brother's pickup. That's an old Dodge. That's
Okay.
it. But I shot the whole thing by myself because I was up in Idaho, and during the pandemic, I did a couple of weekly TV shows, and I was shot it all myself and stuff on an iPhone. And then we were starting to talk about music videos, which I don't know anymore for a band, at least at our level. You make a video and it costs, whatever, 10, 20 grand to make a music video. And then it's like, what do you do with it? Like guys like us, we can put it on YouTube, but there's no more MTV and CMT, VH1, it's like they're still there, but they don't show music videos. So it's kind of like, what do we spend on this dough on? So I wanted to see if I could make a video for free, basically, and shoot it myself. And I didn't really know if it was going to be cool enough to actually use when I shot it. So I did it all with my iPhone, and I have a drone that you can there's like settings where you can like lock it on a subject and it'll like follow it or zoom around it and do kind of cool stuff just pre-programmed. So I did it all up in Idaho, and It was kind of fun. And I've been editing a little bit, for quite a while. So I edited it, and then we just threw it out there, and it didn't cost a dime aside from a couple tanks of gas for my little brother.
Because there was a shot that I was just amazed. I kept looking at it going like, he'd have to be a professional to know how to do this. There's a shot underneath the bridge. Was that in Idaho as well? Did you know exactly that you'd be filming there, or?
No, I've actually shot a lot of stuff, not a ton, but a bunch of the stuff from that video were footage I already had, because I'm always cruising around. I've got a pretty decent camera, and not a video camera, but just a still camera. And so I've always got that with me, and my drone lives in that bag. So I was just driving around, getting to the airport actually, and I went the long way and stopped. That's the Prime Bridge in Twin Falls. It's over the Snake River Canyon. It's right next to where Evel Knievel jumped his motorcycle back in the 70s. You can actually see the jump. Well, it wasn't a motorcycle, it was a rocket, but he didn't make it. Spoiler alert. But anyway, yeah, that bridge, there's actually, I think it's the only bridge in the States that you can legally base jump off of. It's like 406 feet from the river to the top of the bridge. And I figured if it's legal to jump off of this thing, I can probably fly the drone under it. So I just pulled over, and there's a little rest, kind of scenic lookout on the side of the road. And I just flew the drone under it, and went back a couple times. And then right down the road from there, or right down the river, I should say, is that the waterfall that's in there too, is that Shoshone Falls. And it's like probably 5 miles from there, just right down the Snake River. So I shot both of those, and the waterfall one was a little more. I was kind of nervous about that because I couldn't see the drone the whole time, which you're kind of supposed to be able to see the drone, I guess, technically. And so I just flying it over that with all the power lines and stuff. I was kind of a little nervous about shooting that waterfall, but.
So the only visual that you had was whatever you were looking at on the screen, or?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
One of the things that I remember really getting into when I first, started just absolutely loving you guys was Sunset Motel, and songs that were just big and elaborate and all these different parts. And I always wondered, well, how do they get so many parts into a song? How does the band even do this song live? But I know that one of the things you wanted to capture with this latest album were try to keep it under 3 minutes, try to keep it rolling. What was the expression Cody used? Don't bore us, get to the chorus.
Yeah,
I thought that was pretty funny. What were some of the reasons why you wanted to go in that direction for this album?
Well, it's a concept I started thinking about quite a while ago. It was kind of based on my original idea was because you ride around in somebody's car these days, and they're like, oh, you got to hear this song, and they get like about halfway through it, and then they move on to the next song. They're like, oh yeah, like you get like a chorus into it, and then another verse, and then they skip ahead to the next song. Oh, you got to hear this. So I was just like, man, nobody even listens to a whole record anymore, let alone a whole song. Because the attention span these days is, and that's just generalizing. I realize people actually do listen to whole songs every now and then, but just the short attention span that people have these days made me think, well, why don't we just go back to the 50s and 60s when all the songs, you listen to those old songs, they're all like 2, maybe 3. Longest tune is like 2.5 minutes back in those days, and that was because they had to fit on a 45. You only have so much space on a 45 RMP album. That's how they used to send the singles around. So that was kind of the concept. It was like, you have to keep it under 30 or right around or 3 minutes to fit it on a 45. And so that was kind of the ballpark we were going for. And then, not just make it short, but kind of like, the pace of game in baseball these days where the intros are, everything has had to have purpose, like no long solos and no long drawn out intros or outros, and turnarounds are all short. The verses are short, the choruses are short, but kind of bang for your buck, like try to say as much as possible with as few words, and then transfer that same idea to the instrumental parts, like let's make this lick really count because it's only going to be, 8 or 10 seconds instead of 15 or 30. So that was just the overall broad strokes approach. And I was kind of worried that the songs are going to seem really short, but I don't know if it's just me, but after the record's been out for a while and after we recorded it, it doesn't really feel short to me. The songs don't seem that way. They just kind of happen. It's kind of like the old, 60s rock and roll singles. Like you don't really think of it when you're listening to Love Me Do, and it's like 2 minutes and 4 seconds or whatever, so it's unless you really know or you're going into it thinking about it, it just seems like a regular old rock and roll song.
I think that's what it was when I listened to it. Was I recognized how poignant each song was, but it wasn't expectations, because again, when I hear your music, one of the things that I lose it over is, man, how do they even think to go to all these different parts? Especially, I think Sunset Motel kind of brought that out of me. When the first time I heard it, I just couldn't believe what I was listening to. I do know, but you have a lot of great singles. It seems like out of the album, more than usual, including the one that you have right now, "What's Left of My Heart," which was written on your hitscation. Am I
Yes.
even saying that right?
Yeah, that's right. That's it's a term we coined.
So what's the hitscation?
It's my brother Gary from Mickey and the Motorcars, and then our buddy Jeff Crosby, who's a singer songwriter from Idaho. The three of us, I guess we've done it 3 times. We've gone to this. It's a little resort, kind of out in the middle of nowhere. It's just basically a hot springs, and we rent this cabin, and we just hole up for like 3 or 4 days and write songs. And after the first year, we were calling it the going on a vacation to write hits. So we just started calling it the Hitscation. And we've actually written a ton of songs over the last 2 or 3 years of going out and doing it. And Crosby's recorded a bunch. Gary's recorded a few. I think there's 4 or 5 on this album that came out of those trips. So it's been pretty successful.
I know that the last album that you guys did, that the Last Frontier, this entire album was done by Cody and Jonathan Tyler producing it. It was really cool to see that online when he made the announcement that he was producing the album. What was it like working with him in the studio?
It was great. He's awesome, and we've known him for a long time. And Cody's recorded with him a bunch, and I don't think I'd ever recorded with him before the record, but we wanted to bring in an outside producer because we haven't had one for quite a while. It'd been several records since we had a producer that wasn't in the band. So, and I did the Sunset Motel, or no, it was American Jackpot. Sorry, I did that one. I produced that one on my own, and that was fun. But you end up having a lot of outside help when you're doing that anyway. So we felt like we needed to get a different producer to come in and give us a hand. And Cody thought of Jonathan, and I like all the stuff he's recorded. I listened to a bunch of his stuff, and especially his records. And he's a cool cat. He's real laid back, and we have a lot of the same influences and kind of gravitate towards that old school approach in recording. Where it's try to get it live and get the sounds right before you start recording, so you don't have to try to fix it in the mix, and a lot of the old school approaches. And he had some great arrangement ideas and yada yada. So between the 3 of us, we came up with some pretty cool arrangements and cool sounds. And there's a lot of stuff on there that I don't think would have really turned out as good as they did without Jonathan's input.
Last year you made a big announcement, and I mentioned this in the last interview, which is the fact that you guys aren't calling it quits. You're just calming the calendar down, which, let me tell you, whenever this was first announced to me, people like me that didn't have all the answers, I was kind of freaking out. So that was the main reason why I wanted to do this interview. But I quickly realized you guys are just going to slow the calendar down, and you're going to have a little bit more time on your hands when this year's done with, 2025. So what are you looking forward to getting involved in when the calendar slows down?
That's more what I'm looking forward to not getting involved in.
Perfect.
No, I mean, honestly, I'm looking forward to taking a little more time, away from the road, especially, like we still, I keep tell everybody this that asks us, like, we all really genuinely still love to play music, and we love being on the road and traveling, and it's still a lot of fun, but we've just done it so much and for so long that, I'm looking forward to doing something else, for a while. And mostly just, taking it easy, and, probably for at least a couple of years, I won't do too much, play a few gigs here and there, and, mostly just try to just hang out at my place in Idaho and, get up in the mountains and, do some fishing and, just enjoy the outdoors up there. And, just something a little different than going out every weekend and hitting the road.
Yeah. I also found out through the last interview because I was reading about the Bronze Brothers reunion, and the math wasn't mathing for me whenever I read 40 years. I was like, how in the world have these guys been putting that on for 40 years? So I did find the background on that. So finding out that so have you been pretty much on the road for almost 4 decades now, or?
Pretty much. I mean, I started singing with my dad and his band when I was like 5 or 6 years old, just getting up, and not all the time, but that's when I started getting up and playing with him. And Cody started getting on playing fiddle. And then, we eventually started just being dad's band. So I think I was like nine or so when we were actually, on the road playing in dad's band, so in a couple of years, it will be like 40 years of being a professional musician for me and Cody. So we've been literally doing this since, we were just little kids. So, when people are even looking at the Reckless will be 30 years next year, which is a long time, but, Cody and I got 10 years on that. So it's a long time, when people, you say I've been doing this my whole life, it's like, for real.
Exactly. I can say that, but it was like, I mean, a teenage years, and you're already kind of like watching other guys. I had the capability of driving. Let's just say that. Like whenever I was when I was doing it. So 9, that's crazy that you've been doing it for that long. I did notice, speaking of live, that you're going to be doing, I was trying to check some of the dates, and I did see a big show that I was pretty excited about that I wanted to ask you. In December, you're going to be playing a show with Shiny Ribs over at the ACL Live at the Moody Theater.
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to be a live taping, or is that just going to be a show out there?
No, I don't think so. I don't think we're taping it. It's not going to be on ACL or the show, but it's the place where they film Austin City Limits. It's a beautiful theater. It's just, they built it, I'd say maybe 10 years ago or something. And at the time, it was like considered the most high tech, nicest room in the country, and it still is. Just, it's, I don't know, it holds like 3,000 or 4,000 people, and it's just everything state of the art. Stage is gorgeous. There's not a bad seat in the house type of joint. So it's in my opinion, it's the nicest room in town by far. And we don't get to play there very often because it's probably a little bit too big for us. But with us kind of winding down and putting Shiny Ribs in there, and because we don't play as much in Austin as we used to, I think we'll be able to fill it up and have a great night.
Have you done shows with Shiny before? Shiny Ribs?
Oh yeah. And I'm not sure who's going on last, but I hope it's not us, because those guys are they're phenomenal. They're great. I don't want to have to follow them. But yeah,
you got to bring that mojo if you're going to do it. You got to bring that.
Oh, he's great, man. That's one of the best bands and best shows in town for sure. Yeah, they're awesome.
He does get your shoulders shaking.
Oh yeah.
One of my favorite things about talking about you guys is that I see so much influence when it comes to live music, when it comes to studio work. So talking to you about these things, it's just a treat for me. But I wanted to dive into something before I let you go, which was favorite albums. And I was talking about this to Cody. He said he'd shared a room with you since y'all was little. So he said, I don't see his answers being that different than mine. But growing up, listening to albums, which ones had the most influence on you, do you think, for where you record or for how you do live shows? Is there any records that really stick out from your past?
Yeah, I mean, the stuff that we listened to when we were kids, sharing a bedroom, like I'm sure you mentioned Guitar Town, Steve Earle, and that's one of our biggest ones. And we listened to all kinds of stuff when we were kids, mostly from Dad's collection, Dwight Yoakam and Robert Earl Keen and Billy Joe Shaver. And he had like a bunch of old rock and roll records that he let us borrow or gave us, Chuck Berry and the Beach Boys and the Byrds and Flying Burrito Brothers, and a lot of that kind of stuff that we listened to from Dad's collection. And then when we started buying our own records and kind of moving towards what we're doing now, it was like Sunvolt and the Billy Joe Shaver's Live at Smith's Old Bar, and started listening to rock and roll, Tom Petty and the Beatles and Springsteen. And I listened to a lot more rock and roll early on than my brothers did. I kind of was the first one to start listening to that because we grew up pretty much listening to country. And then, but I don't know, the ones that influence to this day, like definitely Guitar Town and Sunvolt's Trace and that Billy Joe live record. And, that's kind of the core sound of the band were those things that were going on when we formed the band, and they still carry over to this day. And then, I think a lot more rock and roll has entered the picture over the years as far as the direction of the sound and the way we record. And then, just the live shows are always fairly upbeat. We throw in a few slow ones, but they're always, lean towards more rock and roll energy on stage, So that's, the records that would influence the live show, it'd be more like the Springsteen stuff and the Petty stuff. And just, trying to keep that really high energy. We're not doing backflips or anything, but we try to keep the vibe, pretty rocking when we're playing live shows.
You don't do the Bruce Springsteen slide across the stage on your knees?
No, I'm too old for that shit. Yeah, it's crazy. The first time I ever saw him was it was 2012. Saw him in New York, and he was 60 something at the time. And I walked away from that show just I couldn't believe what I had just seen. It was just it blew my mind how great that band was and how great of an entertainer he was. It was just kind of, I wish I would have seen him play when I was 16,
Yeah, right.
Because I don't know, it was really, really inspirational. It was awesome.
I think about the fact that I wish I could have seen Willie Nelson in the band in 1984. That's that to me, that's a primo year to watch that band. So I'm always really jealous of seeing or hearing live albums. The Charlie Daniels album that I was listening to the other day. Some of those live albums just the best. And when you're catching them, especially, I think Willie just released a Live at Budokan album, which I didn't even know existed. And sounds funny saying out loud, but it was from 1984. And it's the perfect time to listen to him. So,
man, I need to get that because I think we saw him right around then. It was the first show my brothers and I ever got to go see. The first big concert was Willie and family at the Boise Fair. And I was 5 or 6, so it would have been around 84. That would have been the ballpark. So I got to pick that up.
It's a good one.
It
just came out not too long ago. It's called Live at Budokan, and I was very, very excited to receive that. We've been talking with Willie Braun from Reckless Kelly. Their brand new album, The Last Frontier, out now. Of course, we're streaming the brand new single on the radio station 94.9 The Outlaw with What's Left of My Heart. Willie, man, thank you so much for sitting down, chat with me. Let me know some of your favorite albums. I appreciate all of it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining the James Cook podcast. Make sure that you're subscribing and make sure that you're catching the next podcast because I'll have none other than Mr. Brandon Ryder on the show, and I'm looking forward to that one. So until then, see you down the road.